a former Mexican politician has a novel idea to keep his countrymen from being deported back to the homeland. Just ruin the American court system. Jorge Castañeda was once Minister of Foreign Affairs for Mexico's government under Vicente Fox. He's also a professor at NYU and a board member for Human Rights Watch. He recently called on the Mexican government to fund lawyers who will clog up the U.S. immigration courts as much as possible intentionally in order to prevent deportations back to Mexico. Castañeda has also denounced a wall on the Mexican border, saying that if President Trump persists in building it, Mexico should allow terrorists to enter this country freely in retaliation. Jorge Castañeda joins us tonight. Jorge, thanks a lot for coming on. So I want to read you a really, for our viewers who haven't seen this is a quote from a couple of weeks ago, you to the New York Times, and you said this: Mexico must say clearly that we will encourage all potential deportees to demand a hearing upon arrest and to refuse voluntary removal, that we will provide legal support on our dime for all arrested undocumented workers, and that we will deny entry to anyone whom American authorities cannot prove is a Mexican national. This seems like a change. When did the Mexican government develop this concern for due process?
Well, it's not the Mexican government. I am not a government official. I left the government 14 years ago, and I speak only for myself. I've always been a firm believer in due process in Mexico and everywhere in the world, and consequently, I think that this is one of the most admirable things the U.S. has, and Mexico should use it. I don't recall the United States letting people in who do not prove that they are American. Well, I don't want the U.S. to deport anybody to Mexico who the U.S. cannot prove is Mexican. And yes, I want to use as much as possible the U.S. judicial system, the court system, and in particular immigration courts and judges to jam the system, to backlog it so much that perhaps President Trump will change his mind and stop this ridiculous, unpleasant, hostile policy of deporting people. Today, they even arrested a young dreamer in Seattle, Ricardo Ramirez Medina, a 23-year-old who is in the U.S. legally, who has a work permit to work legally. They went after his father, and they got him too, even though he has a written promise. Well, I don't know if they'll let him go. For the moment, they haven't arrested him. So, yes, I want to use the U.S.
living in Mexico, I presumably you're used to injustices in the justice system. But let me ask you, so you're suggesting, look, as a foreign national, you're suggesting destroying our legal system because you don't think the U.S. government has the right, as the president has stated, to deport people who've been convicted of felonies. And you're saying that they should resist, presumably
I wouldn't be destroying it. How can I suggest destroying it if what I'm saying is
by gumming it up, by making it unworkable?
Using it is not destroying it. It's well, of course, making it unworkable.
If I pour sugar in your gas tank, I've destroyed your engine.
More judges. I want to stop people from being deported from the United States. Absolutely. And the best way to do it is to use the U.S. legal system, the justice system. Absolutely.
To commit sabotage
it's an
upon the legal
admirable
system.
Justice system.
Yeah,
it's a way of sabotaging the legal system.
You would take advantage of it. You would destroy it. Okay.
No, so let me just ask you. I want to sabotage it so it can't be used.
Okay, I think one of the uncovered parts of this debate is the motive of the Mexican ruling class, of which you're a member. You went to Princeton. The motive of the Mexican ruling class in wanting to keep some very large, unknown number, but over 10 million illegal immigrants in the United States rather than Mexico. Now, half of your country lives in poverty. The tax rates on rich people in Mexico are the lowest in the region. My question to you is, rather than destroying our legal system, have you paused a minute to think, well, why are all these people leaving my country to go to the country next door? Maybe we should spend some time and build a social safety net rather than offloading the costs onto the American middle class. Has that occurred to you?
No, it's occurred to me, and I don't agree with you at all on that, Mr. Tucker. I think the real issue here is that these are people who have been living on many occasions in the United States for 10 years, 20 years. They don't have papers. They may have entered without papers, but they are there. They have children who are American citizens. In many cases, they are married to American citizens. They are law-abiding, hardworking people, and there is no reason to deport them. You want to deport the criminals? Fine, but make sure they're really criminals, not just people that all of a sudden President Trump has decided
you're actually dodging my question, which is
of being criminals. No, I'm not dodging.
Why are they
those people left?
Yes, you are, because
and have set down roots in the United States. They're there already.
But why?
We can talk about talk about what happens with future flows. What you should do is legalize those.
Hold on. Let me ask my question, if you would. Right. I get it, the filibuster thing, but this is a sincere question. So a huge percentage of your population has
I'm stating my viewpoint. I'm not just answering your questions.
But why not? So you want to spend all this money to gum up and sabotage our legal system. Why wouldn't you spend money instead? And maybe you could pay some more taxes to do this, because rich people in Mexico, and you're one of them, pay very little in tax, to build a social safety net that might keep people in Mexico. Half your population is in poverty, and yet you're spending money to keep them here. We're the pressure relief valve for your country. Do you feel good about that?
Not to keep them there. That's where they live, where they work, where
because
they
your country
children,
is dysfunctional.
Where
That's
they are
why.
married.
That's why.
And by the way, I pay taxes in both. I pay taxes in both countries. So believe me, I pay.
Well, you pay less taxes in Mexico.
I have to pay in Mexico and in the U.S., which is fine. That's the way it should be. No problem with that.
But hold on.
Like, by the way, all of my compatriots who are in the U.S. also pay U.S. taxes. That's something you and your network don't often mention. Mexicans, with or without papers in the U.S., pay taxes, and very high taxes.
But it's still, but look, there's been a lot of study on this, and you're a college professor. Okay. I'm not going to shout over you, but look, remittances to Mexico are now a more significant portion of your economy than oil revenue. So actually, Mexico needs the money from the over 10 million Mexicans living here illegally in order to function as a state. And my question again is, have you spent any time thinking about how to improve your own country that people won't want to flee as economic refugees?
Let me just straighten out your numbers. So let me just straighten out your numbers to begin with. There's about 5.8 million Mexicans without papers, and there's another 6 million with papers who are legal residents of the United States. So it's not 10 million.
That's untrue. First of all, that's untrue.
Secondly,
I think I can speak to this with some certainty.
Those are the official U.S. Census Bureau. Those are official U.S. Census Bureau.
No, they're not. Whatever. Okay,
figures,
but you're not answering the core question.
Absolutely, they are. The second part of your numbers are also wrong on the issue of how important remittances are. They're very important to many Mexican families, but $27 billion over a GDP of $1.5 trillion, I'm sorry, is about 3% of total Mexican GDP.
But you don't have to pay the social services costs of over 10 million people, poor people who've left your country. Look, yes or no, and we'll stop with this.
In many cases, the social services are paid for in many cases also. They are also paid for in many cases because their families are in Mexico. Their families, their children sometimes are in Mexico
Maybe this works. All right. Thanks. I appreciate it. I urge you to think about that, though. Up next, we'll have a chat with the Washington Post.